After losing everything in a hurricane, he questioned his faith in God. But hours later, an amazing miracle brought him to tears. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of the First Hope Community Church in Palm Harbor, Florida, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the worn wooden pews. Pastor Marcus Johnson stood at his lectern, his fingers tracing the familiar grooves in the aged oak as he watched his congregation file in for the Sunday service. At 42, Marcus had led this church for 15 years, building it from a small gathering of 50 faithful to a thriving community of over 300 members. This particular Sunday held special significance. His wife Laura sat in the front row, her hand resting gently on her growing belly, a subtle smile playing on her lips. After years of trying and countless prayers, they were finally expecting their first child. The entire congregation had celebrated with them when they announced the pregnancy 3 months ago, and today they would reveal the newly completed nursery, a labor of love that the whole community had contributed to. "Good morning," Marcus began, his deep voice resonating through the sanctuary. "Today we gather not just as a congregation but as a family." His eyes met Laura's, and he felt his heart swell with gratitude. At 38, her pregnancy was considered high risk, but every checkup had shown perfect progress. "Before we begin our regular service, Laura and I would like to share something special with you all." The congregation followed them to the adjacent building where the nursery was located. The room, once a simple storage space, had been transformed into a haven of warmth and comfort. Hand-painted murals of Noah's Ark adorned the walls, created by Sarah Matthews, their resident artist. The ceiling featured a stunning constellation of stars that would glow softly in the dark, installed by David Chen, their electrician. Every piece of furniture and decoration represented the love and support of their church family. Laura squeezed Marcus's hand as their congregation oohed and ahed over the details. "It's perfect," she whispered, wiping away a tear. At 6 months pregnant, she radiated joy, her blue dress accentuating her growing belly. The celebration was cut short by an urgent knock at the church's main entrance. Thomas Rivera, their head deacon, burst in, his face ashen. "Pastor Marcus, you need to see this." He held up his phone, showing a weather alert that made Marcus's blood run cold. Hurricane Gabriel, initially predicted to turn east and head out to sea, had defied all meteorological models. The Category 5 storm was now bearing down directly on their section of the Florida coast, with sustained winds of 165 miles per hour. They had less than 3 hours before it made landfall. "Everyone, please listen carefully," Marcus called out, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his chest. "We need to evacuate immediately. Those of you who live in low-lying areas, please coordinate with others who live inland. We'll help everyone find a safe place." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Marcus and Laura worked alongside church members, securing windows and helping elderly congregants evacuate. The wind had already picked up significantly, bending palm trees and sending debris flying through the air. "Marcus, we need to go," Laura urged, as the sky turned an ominous shade of green. They had stayed longer than most, ensuring everyone else had safely departed. The drive to their home inland would take at least 45 minutes in good weather. They made it halfway home when the storm hit with full force. The rain came down in impenetrable sheets, reducing visibility to mere feet. Their car crawled along the highway, buffeted by powerful wind gusts. Through the downpour, Marcus could see other vehicles abandoned on the roadside, and palm trees bent almost double. "Hold on," Marcus shouted, as a massive gust slammed into their SUV, forcing him to fight with the steering wheel. Laura gripped the dashboard, her face pale with fear. They were still 10 miles from home when Marcus spotted a massive oak tree swaying dangerously ahead of them. "We need to turn around," he decided, attempting to execute a 3-point turn on the flooded road. That's when they heard it, the deafening crack of splitting wood. The ancient oak was falling, its massive trunk headed directly for their vehicle. Marcus slammed the accelerator, but the car hydroplaned on the floodwaters. Time seemed to slow as he watched the tree descend. In the last second, he reached for Laura, trying to shield her with his body. The impact was devastating. When Marcus regained consciousness, the world was a cacophony of howling wind and breaking glass. The tree had crushed the rear half of their SUV, and rain poured in through the shattered windows. "Laura!" he called out, his voice barely audible over the storm. She lay slumped against the passenger door, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. "Laura, baby, please wake up." With trembling hands, he checked her pulse, It was there but weak. He fumbled for his phone, thanking God when he found it still worked. The emergency services were overwhelmed, but after what felt like an eternity, he finally got through. "Please," he begged into the phone, "my wife is pregnant and injured. We're trapped in our car on Highway 19, about 10 miles north of Palm Harbor." The dispatcher promised to send help as soon as possible, but warned it could take time due to the dangerous conditions. For 2 terrifying hours, Marcus held Laura's hand in the darkness, praying more fervently than he ever had in his life. The hurricane raged around them, transforming their familiar world into an apocalyptic nightmare. He could hear buildings being torn apart, and the screech of twisting metal filled the air. When the rescue finally arrived, it came in the form of 3 firefighters who had to cut through the crushed vehicle to reach them. Laura was carefully extracted and rushed to Tampa General Hospital, with Marcus following in the rescue vehicle. The journey through the storm-ravaged landscape was like traversing a war zone. At the hospital, Laura was immediately taken into emergency surgery. Marcus paced the waiting room, his clothes still dripping water onto the sterile floor. Hour after agonizing hour passed with no news. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression made Marcus's heart stop. "Mr. Johnson," the doctor began carefully, "your wife is stable, but she's in a coma. The head trauma was severe. As for the baby," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "remarkably, we've detected a strong heartbeat. However, the next 48 hours will be critical for both of them." Marcus collapsed into a chair, his world spinning. Through the hospital windows, he could see the hurricane still raging, its fury unabated. His phone was filled with messages about the church. The building had been completely destroyed. Their home, he would later learn, had been swept away by the storm surge. As dawn broke the next morning, Marcus stood at the window of Laura's ICU room, watching the last bands of Hurricane Gabriel move inland. His wife lay motionless, connected to countless machines, their unborn child's heartbeat marking time on a monitor. Everything he had built, everything he had loved, lay in ruins. The thought of preaching about God's love and protection now felt like ash in his mouth. In that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the beeping of machines keeping his family alive, Marcus Johnson felt his faith, the cornerstone of his entire life, begin to crumble. Little did he know that this moment of absolute despair would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about faith, miracles, and the mysterious ways in which the divine sometimes works through destruction to create something greater. The first chapter of Marcus's story had ended in devastation, but an unlikely messenger of hope was about to enter his life, bringing with her mysteries that would shake the very foundation of his understanding of faith and reality. 3 days after Hurricane Gabriel ravaged Palm Harbor, Marcus Johnson stood among the ruins of First Hope Community Church. The once proud building had been reduced to scattered lumber and shattered dreams. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across the debris, illuminating fragments of their destroyed lives. Hymn books swollen with rainwater, pieces of the beloved stained glass windows, and splinters of pews where families had worshipped for generations. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned congregation members and fellow pastors from across the country, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to respond. The weight of his reality crushed down upon him. Laura still lay comatose in Tampa General Hospital, their unborn child's fate hanging by a thread. Their home had been completely destroyed, and now, standing in the wreckage of his church, he felt the last threads of his faith unraveling. Marcus picked up a waterlogged Bible from the debris, its pages stuck together, the gold-leafed edges now dulled with mud. For 15 years, he had preached from this very book about God's love, protection, and purpose. The words that had once flowed so easily from his lips now felt hollow, meaningless in the face of such devastating loss. "Where were you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Where were you when your people needed you?" The question echoed in the empty space where the church's vaulted ceiling had once been. With trembling hands, he pulled out his phone and opened the social media app. His last post from just before the hurricane had been a call for prayer and community support. The comments section was filled with well wishes and promises of prayer, all of which now seemed to mock him. Without fully processing what he was doing, Marcus hit the Go Live button. The red recording light blinked at him, and he found himself staring into the camera, tears streaming down his face. "For 15 years, he began, his voice shaking, "I've stood in this church and preached about God's infinite love and protection. I've comforted grieving families, celebrated marriages, and baptized children. I've promised people that God would never give them more than they could handle. He turned the camera to show the destruction around him. Look at this. Look at what's left of our sanctuary. My wife Laura, the most faithful, loving person I know, lies in a coma fighting for her life and the life of our unborn child. Our home is gone. Everything we built, everything we believed in, has been swept away. The viewer count began to climb as his raw emotion drew in an audience. Members of his congregation, fellow pastors and strangers alike, watched as their respected pastor Marcus Johnson began to break down. I've counseled people through their darkest moments, always assuring them that God had a plan. But where is that plan now? Where was God when the hurricane tore apart our lives? When that tree crashed into our car? When Laura, his voice cracked, when Laura lay bleeding in my arms? The comments started flooding in, some offering prayers, others expressing concern, and a few criticizing his public display of doubt. Marcus ignored them all, caught in the grip of his spiritual crisis. I've given my life to ministry, to serving God and this community, and in return, he laughed bitterly, gesturing at the devastation around him. In return, we get this. So today I'm done. I'm done pretending. I'm done making excuses for a God who allows such suffering. I'm done with faith that offers no real protection when the storms come. His hands were shaking so badly now that the video image trembled. To everyone I've counseled over the years, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for telling you that everything happens for a reason. I'm sorry for giving you false hope. I was wrong. We were all wrong. The viewer count had reached into the thousands, but Marcus barely noticed. Years of suppressed doubt and questioning poured out of him like a broken dam. If there is a God, he's not the loving father I've preached about. He's not the protector I've described in countless sermons. He's either powerless to help us, or he simply doesn't care. Either way, I can't serve him anymore. I won't. With tears streaming down his face, Marcus looked directly into the camera. I, Marcus Johnson, hereby renounce my faith and resign as pastor of First Hope Community Church. There is no hope here. There is no divine plan. There is only chaos and the cruel randomness of nature. He ended the live stream abruptly, letting the phone fall from his numb fingers onto a pile of debris. The magnitude of what he'd just done began to sink in. In 15 minutes, he had torn down everything he'd spent his adult life building. His phone exploded with notifications, calls, messages, comments, but he ignored them all. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Marcus wandered through the wreckage of the church. He found himself in what remained of his office. The walls were gone, but his heavy wooden desk had somehow survived, though water-damaged and partially crushed. In the drawer, he found the ultrasound picture from Laura's last appointment, miraculously preserved in its frame. Their baby, their miracle, that they had waited so long for. The image blurred as fresh tears filled his eyes. The sound of footsteps crunching on debris made him turn. Sarah Matthews, the church's artist who had painted the nursery murals, stood there, her face etched with concern. "Marcus, I just saw your video," she said softly. "Did you come to try to restore my faith?" he asked bitterly. "To tell me God works in mysterious ways?" Sarah shook her head, stepping carefully over a fallen beam to reach him. "No. I came because you're my friend and you're in pain. Faith or no faith, that hasn't changed." Something in her simple acceptance broke him. Marcus collapsed onto what remained of his desk, sobs racking his body. Sarah said nothing, simply placing a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. "I don't know who I am anymore, Sarah," he finally managed to say. "Everything I've built my life on feels like a lie. How do I face our congregation? How do I face Laura when she wakes up?" "You don't have to face anyone right now," Sarah assured him. "You don't have to have any answers. You're allowed to break, Marcus. You're allowed to question. You're human." The words "you're human" echoed in his mind. For so long he had tried to be more, a spiritual leader, a pillar of faith, an example to others. Now, stripped of all pretense, he was just a man facing the ruins of his life. As the day wore on, more people from the congregation came by. Some, like Sarah, offered silent support. Others tried to counsel him, to argue with his decision, to quote scripture at him. Marcus retreated further into himself with each interaction, eventually seeking refuge in his car, one of the few possessions he had left. He drove to the hospital, where Laura lay unchanged, the steady beep of monitors marking time in her quiet room. The nurses had set up a second monitor to track their baby's heartbeat, strong and steady despite everything. Marcus sank into the chair beside her bed, taking her hand in his. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her still form. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I'm not strong enough to keep believing." He placed his other hand on her belly, feeling the slight movement of their child. "I'm sorry I'm not the man you married anymore." As night fell over Tampa General Hospital, Marcus's phone continued to light up with notifications. His video had gone viral, spreading far beyond their local community. Religious news websites were already running stories about the pastor who publicly renounced his faith after Hurricane Gabriel. Social media buzzed with debates about his actions, some condemning him as a false prophet, others praising his raw honesty, many offering prayers he no longer wanted. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, Marcus Johnson, no longer Pastor Johnson, faced the longest night of his soul. Unknown to him, amid the growing storm of controversy surrounding his public renunciation, a young girl was making her way through the hurricane-ravaged streets of Palm Harbor, carrying with her secrets that would shake his understanding of faith and reality to its very core. The stage was set for an encounter that would prove either divine intervention or the cruelest cosmic joke, a test of faith for a man who had just declared he had none left. A week after his public renunciation of faith, Marcus stood among the ruins of First Hope Community Church, attempting to salvage anything worth saving. The morning air was thick with humidity, typical of Florida's late summer, and the sun beat down mercilessly on his shoulders. His viral video had amassed over 2 million views, turning his private crisis of faith into a national conversation about religion and natural disasters. He reached down to pick up a photograph that had somehow survived the hurricane's fury, a faded image of his mother at his ordination ceremony 15 years ago. Sarah Mitchell Johnson had been his spiritual cornerstone, the woman who had taught him to pray before she passed away from cancer when he was just 25. He tucked the photograph into his pocket, trying to ignore the memory of her favorite saying, "God's silence doesn't mean his absence." "She loved gardenias," a small voice said behind him. "She would plant them every spring, and you would help her water them." Marcus spun around, startled not just by the unexpected company, but by the words themselves. A girl of about 10 stood among the debris, wearing a simple blue dress that seemed oddly pristine amid the destruction. Her dark hair was neatly braided, and her eyes held a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. "What did you say?" Marcus asked, his throat suddenly dry. "The gardenias," the girl repeated, taking a step closer. "Your mother would tell you that flowers are God's way of painting hope in the world. That's why you planted them around the church when you became pastor." Marcus felt his hands begin to shake. The gardenia story wasn't something he'd ever shared publicly. It was a private memory he cherished. "Who are you?" he demanded. "How do you know these things?" "My name is Hope," she said simply, as though it explained everything. "And I know lots of things, Pastor Marcus, like how your mother used to make chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday morning, but only after you finished your Bible reading, or how she would sing Amazing Grace when you had nightmares, sitting on the edge of your bed until you fell asleep." Marcus staggered backward, bumping into a fallen beam. These were intimate details of his childhood, things only his mother had known. Even Laura didn't know about the nightmare ritual. It wasn't something he'd ever shared with anyone. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "Who put you up to this? Did someone from the church send you?" Hope shook her head, her expression serious. "Nobody sent me. I came because you needed me to come, just like you needed those pancakes the morning after your father left, and your mother made them, even though it wasn't Sunday." Marcus felt his legs give way, and he sank onto a pile of debris. That morning had been 30 years ago. He was only 12 when his father abandoned them. The memory of sitting at their small kitchen table, trying not to cry as his mother made his favorite breakfast on a Wednesday morning, was seared into his soul. "This isn't real," he said, more to himself than to Hope. "I'm having some kind of breakdown." Hope stepped closer, her small hand reaching out to touch his arm. Her touch felt real enough, warm and solid. "Your mother's last words to you were, 'Keep your heart open, Marcus. God speaks loudest in silence.'" Tears sprang to Marcus's eyes. He had never told anyone his mother's last words. They had been too precious, too personal to share. "How?" he managed to choke out. "How can you know these things?" "Because I was sent to remind you," Hope said gently. "Your mother's faith wasn't blind, Pastor Marcus. She questioned too. Remember the night she found out about the cancer? She threw her Bible across the room, but then she picked it up again, not because she stopped being angry, but because she understood that faith isn't about having all the answers." Marcus stared at the girl, his mind racing. The incident with the Bible was something he'd witnessed alone, standing quietly outside his mother's bedroom door as a young adult. He'd watched through the crack as his strong, faithful mother had her own crisis of faith, only to emerge stronger. "Why are you here?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Because sometimes we need to be reminded of where we came from to understand where we're going, Hope replied. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something that made Marcus's heart stop, a small, worn prayer journal with his mother's initials embossed on the cover. That's impossible, he breathed. That journal was in my house when the hurricane hit. Everything was destroyed. Hope held it out to him. Some things survived the storm for a reason. With trembling hands, Marcus took the journal. It was exactly as he remembered it. The soft leather cover worn smooth by years of use, the small coffee stain on the bottom corner from when he'd bumped his mother's elbow one morning, the slightly bent corner where it had fallen behind her bed once. Open it, Hope encouraged. Marcus turned to the last entry, dated just days before his mother's death. The familiar handwriting brought fresh tears to his eyes. My dearest Marcus, I know you'll find this someday when you need it most. Faith isn't the absence of doubt. It's the courage to keep seeking light even in the darkest storms. When you feel lost, remember that I believed in you even more than I believed in God, and I believed in Him with all my heart. Love, Mom. Marcus looked up to ask Hope how she had found the journal, but she was gone. He jumped to his feet, looking around frantically. Hope, he called out. Hope! But only the whisper of the wind through the ruins answered him. He clutched the journal to his chest, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The encounter had lasted perhaps 15 minutes, but it had shaken him to his core. With shaking fingers, he pulled out his phone and called Sarah Matthews, who had been helping coordinate the church's recovery efforts. Sarah, have you ever seen a young girl around here about 10 years old named Hope? No, Sarah replied, sounding puzzled. Most families with children evacuated before the hurricane and haven't returned yet. Why? Marcus described his encounter, including the impossible knowledge the girl had possessed about his mother. As he spoke, he could hear the incredulity in his own voice. Marcus, Sarah said carefully, are you sure you're okay? You've been under tremendous stress. I'm not hallucinating, Sarah, he interrupted. She was here, she knew things, and things nobody could know. And she had my mother's prayer journal, the one that was in my house when the hurricane destroyed it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'll ask around, Sarah finally said. Maybe someone knows who she is. After hanging up, Marcus sat on a fallen beam, opening the journal again. The pages were intact, filled with his mother's thoughts, prayers, and reflections. He had read it countless times after her death, finding comfort in her words. But now, holding it here amid the ruins of his church, the journal's survival seemed impossible. He turned to a random page and his breath caught as he read, Sometimes God has to break down our walls before He can rebuild us stronger. Marcus, my sweet boy, when that day comes for you, remember that destruction often precedes resurrection. The words, written nearly 20 years ago, seemed to speak directly to his present circumstance. Marcus looked up at the destroyed church around him, seeing it with new eyes. Was this what his mother had somehow foreseen? A movement in his peripheral vision made him turn quickly, hoping to catch sight of Hope, but it was just debris shifting in the wind. Yet the impact of her visit lingered, raising questions he couldn't ignore. How had she known those intimate details about his mother? How had she obtained the journal? And most importantly, why had she appeared now, just when his faith had completely crumbled? As the sun began to set over the ruins of First Hope Community Church, Marcus Johnson sat alone with his mother's journal, his certainty about the death of his faith suddenly less absolute. The mysterious encounter with Hope had planted a seed of doubt in his doubt, a crack in the wall of his disbelief. Little did he know that this encounter was just the beginning. In the coming days, as he would split his time between the destroyed church and his vigilant watch over Laura in the hospital, Hope would appear again, bringing with her more inexplicable knowledge and events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about faith, doubt, and the thin line between coincidence and divine intervention. 2 days after his mysterious encounter with Hope, Marcus sat in the now familiar chair beside Laura's hospital bed at Tampa General Hospital. Her condition remained unchanged, but their unborn child's heartbeat continued strong and steady on the monitor, a small mercy in the midst of chaos. He held his mother's prayer journal in his hands, still struggling to make sense of how it had come into his possession through the strange young girl. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled the room as he watched the morning sun paint shadows across Laura's peaceful face. A nurse named Grace Chen, who had been caring for Laura since her admission, entered the room to check her vitals. "Any changes?" Marcus asked, knowing the answer but hoping anyway. Grace shook her head sympathetically. "Her vitals are stable, And the baby's doing remarkably well. That's something to be thankful for. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. He heard a familiar voice, one that had been haunting his thoughts for the past 2 days. "He's in room 315, Hope's clear voice rang out. "He needs help." Marcus rushed to the door just in time to see Hope's small figure disappearing around the corner. 2 nurses ran past him toward room 315, where an elderly patient had been recovering from heart surgery. "Code blue in 315, someone called out, and the hallway erupted into organized chaos. Marcus followed Grace to the doorway of room 315, watching as the medical team worked to revive the elderly patient. The monitor showed a flat line, but as the doctors prepared the defibrillator, something extraordinary happened. The patient's heart suddenly started beating on its own, his vitals stabilizing without intervention. "I've never seen anything like it," one of the doctors muttered, checking the equipment. He was gone, and then Marcus scanned the hallway for Hope, but she had vanished. When he returned to Laura's room, he found a single gardenia flower on her pillow, his mother's favorite, impossibly fresh and fragrant. Later that afternoon, Marcus approached the nurse's station where Grace was updating charts. "The girl who was here earlier," he began, "about 10 years old, dark hair in braids." Grace looked up, puzzled. "I haven't seen any young children on this floor today. Hospital policy doesn't allow visitors under 12 in the ICU. But you must have heard her," Marcus insisted. "She was the one who alerted everyone about room 315. "Marcus," Grace said gently, "the patient's monitor alarm alerted us. There was no little girl." Marcus ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Can we check the security cameras?" Grace made a few calls, and soon they were in the hospital's security office reviewing the morning's footage. The hallway camera clearly showed the medical team rushing to room 315, but there was no sign of Hope. However, just before the code blue, there was a strange distortion in the video, a soft, inexplicable light that seemed to move down the hallway. "Must be a technical glitch," the security officer said, frowning at the screen. But Marcus wasn't convinced. He spent the next several hours reviewing more footage, and what he found left him speechless. Every night for the past week, the same mysterious light appeared in the hospital corridors, always between 2 and 3 in the morning. It would move from room to room, and remarkably, patients in those rooms would often show sudden improvements in their conditions the next day. As evening approached, Marcus returned to Laura's room, his mind racing with questions. He found Sarah Matthews waiting there, holding a stack of papers. "I asked around about Hope," she said without preamble. "Nobody in the congregation knows of any girl matching her description, but I found something interesting." She handed him a yellowed newspaper clipping from 20 years ago. The article detailed a tragic accident at First Hope Community Church, back when it was still called Palm Harbor Methodist. A young girl named Hope Sullivan had died saving other children when a fire broke out during Sunday school. The accompanying photograph made Marcus's blood run cold. The girl in the grainy image could have been a twin of the Hope he'd met, right down to the braided hair and blue dress. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered, sinking into his chair. "There's more," Sarah continued. "I spoke with some of the older members of the congregation. Apparently after the fire, several people reported seeing a young girl who would appear to those in crisis. The sighting stopped after a few years and eventually became something of a local legend. Before Marcus could respond, the lights in the room flickered and the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. A familiar voice spoke behind them. "The fire wasn't an accident," Hope said. Marcus and Sarah whirled around. Hope stood by Laura's bed, gently touching her hand. Someone left candles burning near the old curtains. They thought the insurance money would help build a bigger church. She looked directly at Marcus. "But God turned their evil into good. My death brought the community together, and the church became a true place of healing." Sarah gasped, clutching Marcus's arm. "You can see her too?" Hope smiled sadly. "Sometimes more than one person needs to witness God's work." She turned back to Laura, placing her other hand on Laura's swollen belly. "Your baby is strong, Pastor Marcus. She has your mother's spirit." "She," Marcus whispered. Hope nodded. "And your wife will wake soon, but first you need to understand why all this happened, why God allowed the hurricane to destroy everything you built." "Why?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. "Because sometimes our foundations need to be shaken so we can build something stronger," Hope replied. "Tomorrow I'll show you the truth about your church, about why it was built here and what it's meant to become." The monitors tracking Laura's vitals suddenly sparked with activity. Her finger twitched, the first voluntary movement she'd made since the accident. "She's fighting her way back," Hope said softly. But there's more you need to see first. Meet me at the church ruins tomorrow at dawn." With that, she turned and walked toward the wall, and through it, disappearing like mist. Sarah's grip on Marcus's arm loosened. I didn't imagine that, did I?" Marcus shook his head, still staring at the spot where Hope had vanished. "No, you didn't." He picked up his mother's journal from the bedside table and opened it to a random page. There, in his mother's handwriting, was an entry he'd somehow never noticed before. "Today, I met a remarkable young girl at the church. She knew things about our family that no one could know. She told me to prepare Marcus for the day when everything would be stripped away, so something greater could be built. I didn't understand then, but now, as I face my own mortality, I begin to see. Hope is more than just a feeling. Sometimes it takes human form." The entry was dated exactly 1 week before his mother's death. Marcus looked at Laura, then at Sarah, who was still pale from their supernatural encounter. "I think," he said slowly, "we're being shown that there's more to faith than what we've understood. This isn't just about believing or not believing. It's about seeing the larger pattern." Grace appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. "Marcus, you need to see this. All the patients who were critical, they're improving. Every single one. The doctors can't explain it." As Marcus followed Grace into the hallway, the security cameras caught another glimpse of that mysterious light, moving from room to room like a gentle tide of healing. In Laura's room, the monitors continued to show increased activity, as if her spirit was fighting its way back to consciousness. Tomorrow at dawn, he would meet Hope at the church ruins, and somehow he knew that everything, the hurricane, his crisis of faith, the mysterious appearances, and even his mother's long-ago words, was leading to something he couldn't yet comprehend. The question was he ready to face whatever truth awaited him? As night fell over Tampa General Hospital, Marcus settled into his usual chair beside Laura, holding both her hand and his mother's journal. Outside the window, a single gardenia bloomed impossibly on a bare branch, its sweet fragrance drifting into the room on the evening breeze, a reminder that some things couldn't be explained by reason alone. Dawn broke over the ruins of First Hope Community Church in a symphony of pink and gold. Marcus arrived early, his mother's journal clutched in one hand and Sarah Matthews beside him. After witnessing Hope's appearance at the hospital the previous evening, Sarah had insisted on accompanying him. The morning air was thick with humidity, promising another scorching Florida day. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, scanning the debris-strewn grounds. Before Marcus could respond, Hope appeared. Unlike her previous manifestations, this time she seemed to materialize gradually, like fog condensing into human form. She wore the same blue dress, but today it seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly quality. "You brought company," Hope observed, smiling at Sarah. "Good. More witnesses make the truth stronger." She turned to Marcus. "Are you ready to learn why your church stands on sacred ground?" Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "Show us." Hope led them through the ruins, moving with purpose toward what had once been the church's eastern wall. "The hurricane didn't just destroy," she explained. "It uncovered. Look here." She pointed to an area where the storm had torn away layers of earth, revealing what appeared to be a metal handle embedded in concrete. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "We've done construction work all over this property. We never found anything like this." Hope knelt and brushed away more soil. "It wasn't meant to be found until now. This bunker was built in 1942 during World War II, but its history goes back much further. The Native Americans knew this land was special. They called it the place where spirit touches earth." Marcus and Sarah helped clear away more debris, revealing a heavy metal door set into the ground. With their combined effort, they managed to pull it open. Stale air wafted up from the darkness below. "Before we go down," Hope said, turning to Marcus, "read today's entry in your mother's journal." Puzzled, Marcus opened the journal. There, on a page he was certain had been blank yesterday, was his mother's handwriting. "The truth about sacred places is that they choose their guardians. Marcus, when you read this, remember that sometimes we must lose everything to find what was meant to be ours all along. The church was built here for a reason." "How is this possible?" Marcus asked, showing Sarah the fresh entry. Hope smiled mysteriously. "Your mother knew more than she ever told you. She knew this day would come." She gestured to the open bunker. "Shall we?" Marcus pulled out his phone's flashlight, and they descended the sturdy metal stairs. The beam revealed a large underground room, approximately 40 feet square, with reinforced concrete walls. But what made them gasp wasn't the structure itself. It was what and who they found inside. Dozens of people from their congregation sat on military-style cots and folding chairs. Emergency supplies lined the walls, and battery-powered lanterns provided light. Among them was Thomas Rivera, their head deacon, who rushed forward at their entrance. "Pastor Marcus, we've been praying you'd find us." Marcus stared in disbelief at his congregants. "All alive, all safe. How did you get here?" "It was the most extraordinary thing," Thomas explained, his voice filled with wonder. "Minutes before the hurricane hit, a young girl appeared in the church. She told us about this bunker and led us here. We thought you must have known about it, that she was working with you." Sarah gripped Marcus's arm. "Hope?" "Yes, that's what she called herself," Thomas confirmed. "She knew things about each of us. Private things, prayers we'd never spoken aloud. She told us to wait here, that God hadn't abandoned us, and that our church would become something greater than we'd ever imagined." Marcus turned to where Hope had been standing, but she had vanished again. Instead, his attention was drawn to a stack of old documents on a metal desk in the corner. As he approached, he saw they were historical records, architectural drawings, and letters dating back to the 1940s. One yellowed envelope bore his name in familiar handwriting, his mother's. Inside, he found a letter dated just days before her death. "My dearest Marcus, by the time you read this, you will have faced your greatest trial and discovered the true purpose of your inheritance. This land has always been special. The church wasn't built here by chance. It was built here because this is a place of healing. During the war, this bunker served as more than just a shelter. People experienced miraculous recoveries here. The government investigated but could never explain it. The Native Americans before us knew its power. They believe a portal exists here between our world and the spirit realm. I discovered all this during my battle with cancer. Hope showed me these records just as she's now showing you. She explained that each generation needs a guardian for this sacred place, someone who has been broken and rebuilt by faith. Your crisis of faith isn't a failure, my son. It's a preparation. Sometimes we must be emptied before we can be filled with greater purpose. The hurricane that destroyed the church has uncovered what was always meant to be found. Let hope guide you. Let her show you why everything had to happen this way. All my love, Mum." As Marcus read the letter aloud, Sarah and Thomas listened in stunned silence. Other congregation members gathered around, their faces showing a mix of awe and understanding. "There's more," Thomas said, bringing over a folder of old newspaper clippings. They documented numerous unexplained healings in Palm Harbor during the 1940s and 50s, many centered around the church's location. There were also anthropological studies of Native American healing ceremonies performed on the same ground centuries earlier. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to an architectural drawing. It showed plans for a healing center that was never built, designed to incorporate both the church and the bunker's unique properties. The date on the plans was 1962, and the architect's name was Mitchell James, Marcus's grandfather. "Your family has been protecting this place for generations," Hope's voice echoed through the bunker, though she remained invisible. "The hurricane didn't destroy your church by chance. It had to happen to reveal what was hidden, to show you your true purpose." Marcus sat heavily on a nearby chair, his mind reeling. "All those years my mother never said a word. She knew this was here, knew what this place really was. She knew you weren't ready yet," Hope's voice explained. "You had to experience your own crisis of faith, your own healing, before you could help heal others. That's why Laura's accident had to happen too." "Laura?" Marcus's head snapped up. "What about Laura?" "Go to her," Hope said. "She's beginning to wake up. When she does, she'll tell you about her dreams. Dreams of this place, of the healing that's meant to happen here. She's part of this too." The bunker's lights flickered, and Hope appeared one final time, solid enough to touch. "Your mother was right, Pastor Marcus. God's silence doesn't mean his absence. Sometimes it just means he's working deeper than we can see." She smiled, touching his hand. "The true purpose of your church is about to be revealed. Are you ready?" Marcus looked around at his gathered congregation, at the historical evidence of miracles, at his mother's letter. Everything that had happened, the hurricane, his crisis of faith, the mysterious appearances of hope, the discovery of the bunker, suddenly aligned like pieces of a divine puzzle. "Yes," he whispered, feeling something shift inside him. It wasn't the blind faith he'd lost, but something deeper, more profound. "Yes, I'm ready." "Then go to your wife," Hope said. "She's waiting. And when she wakes, both of you will begin the work you were always meant to do." As Marcus and Sarah hurried from the bunker to drive to the hospital, they could hear the congregation beginning to sing hymns below ground, their voices rising through the earth like a chorus of witnesses, to the mysterious ways of faith. The sun had fully risen now, painting the ruins of First Hope Community Church in morning light. But Marcus no longer saw destruction when he looked at it. Instead, he saw the foundation for something new, something that had been waiting to be discovered for generations. In his pocket, his mother's journal seemed to pulse with warmth, as if acknowledging that its purpose too had finally been fulfilled. The next chapter of their story was about to begin, and this time it would be built on the surest foundation of all, truth that had been tested, broken, and made stronger through trial. Marcus burst through the doors of Tampa General Hospital with Sarah close behind, his heart pounding in his chest. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the ICU corridor, creating patterns on the sterile floor as they rushed toward Laura's room. Nurse Grace Chen met them at the door, her face glowing with excitement. "She's showing strong signs of waking up," Grace announced. "Her neural activity has increased significantly in the last hour, and she's been moving her fingers and eyelids." Inside the room, the morning light bathed Laura's face in a gentle glow. The steady beep of monitors filled the air, but there was something different about them now, a stronger, more rhythmic pattern that seemed to pulse with life. As Marcus took his usual seat beside her bed, her fingers twitched in response to his touch. "Laura?" he whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "I'm here, sweetheart. If you can hear me, squeeze my hand." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, ever so slightly, her fingers pressed against his. Sarah gasped from where she stood at the foot of the bed. Marcus felt tears welling in his eyes as Laura's eyelids began to flutter. "That's it," he encouraged, his voice thick with emotion. "Come back to us." Slowly, like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, Laura's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, then gradually found Marcus's face. Her lips moved, trying to form words around the breathing tube. "Don't try to talk yet," Grace instructed, moving quickly to check her vitals. "Let me get the doctor to remove the breathing tube." The next few minutes were a flurry of medical activity as doctors removed Laura's breathing tube and performed initial assessments. Finally, they stepped back, allowing Marcus to approach his wife again. "Water!" Laura whispered hoarsely. After taking a few sips through a straw, she looked at Marcus with clear eyes. "I saw her, Marcus. I saw hope." Marcus froze. "What did you say?" "The little girl in the blue dress," Laura continued, her voice growing stronger. "She was with me the whole time. She showed me everything." Sarah stepped forward, exchanging a meaningful look with Marcus. "What did she show you, Laura?" "The church, but not like it was, like it's supposed to be." Laura's hand moved to her belly, where the baby's heartbeat continued strong and steady on the monitor. "Our daughter, she's going to be part of it too." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, taking Laura's hand in both of his. "Tell us everything you remember." Laura closed her eyes, as if watching the memories play out on the inside of her eyelids. "I was in this beautiful place. At first I thought it was heaven, but Hope explained that I was seeing what our church would become. There was this light. It came up from the ground, from some kind of underground chamber." "The bunker," Sarah whispered. Laura's eyes snapped open. "You know about it? It's real." Marcus nodded, pulling out his mother's journal. "We found it this morning. Hope led us there. There are people from our congregation sheltering there. She saved them from the hurricane." "But it's more than just a shelter," Laura said, her voice gaining strength. "In my dreams, Hope showed me its history, the Native Americans, the healings during the war. Your mother." "My mother?" Marcus leaned forward. "What about her?" "She knew, Marcus. She knew everything. Hope showed me conversations they had before she died. Your mother was preparing the way for what's coming." Laura tried to sit up and Marcus helped adjust her pillows. "The cancer. She could have been healed in the bunker, but she chose not to be." "What? Why?" Marcus felt his heart constrict. "Because she knew you needed to go through this crisis of faith. She knew the hurricane was coming, that everything would be stripped away, so it could be rebuilt according to God's true purpose." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "She sacrificed her own healing so you could become who you needed to be." Marcus sat back, stunned. All this time his mother had known. She had faced death willingly, understanding it was part of a larger plan. He opened her journal with trembling hands, and there on a previously empty page, new words appeared in his mother's handwriting. "The hardest act of faith is letting go of what we want for what God knows we need. My healing would have kept the old church standing, preventing the new from emerging. Sometimes a mother's greatest love is letting her child walk through darkness to find a greater light." "Our baby girl," Laura continued, rubbing her belly. "Hope says she'll be born with a gift. She'll be able to see what we can't, the thin places where heaven touches earth. She'll help us understand how to use the bunker's power." Grace, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. "I don't mean to interrupt, but there's something you should know. Every patient who was critical yesterday has stabilized. The doctors are calling it a miracle, and the security cameras—" She pulled out her phone, showing them footage from the previous night. The mysterious light they had seen before was clearly visible, moving from room to room, but this time it had a distinct shape, a small girl in a flowing dress. "She's been preparing the whole hospital," Laura said softly, "showing everyone that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about faith, community, and understanding that some places are touched by something greater than ourselves." Just then, the room's temperature dropped slightly, and Hope appeared beside Laura's bed. This time she seemed more solid, more present than in her previous manifestations. "Now you understand," she said, looking at each of them in turn. "The hurricane wasn't a punishment, it was preparation. The old church served its purpose, but it was built on only half the truth. The new one will combine faith with the power that's always been in that ground." "But why now?" Marcus asked. "Why did all this have to happen at once?" "Because the world is ready," Hope replied. "People are hungry for more than just words about faith. They need to see it in action. The healing center your grandfather designed, the one that was never built, its time has come. But it needed a leader who had been broken and rebuilt, who had walked through doubt and emerged stronger." She turned to Laura. "Your recovery will be the first of many. The baby you carry will be a bridge between worlds, helping others understand what I've shown you. And you, Marcus," she smiled at him, "your crisis of faith wasn't a failure. It was a transformation." Hope placed her hands on Laura's belly, and the room filled with a soft, golden light. The baby's heartbeat on the monitor seemed to harmonize with some greater rhythm, creating a sound like distant music. "The healing has already begun," Hope said. "When you're strong enough to leave here, Laura, you'll help Marcus build something new on that sacred ground. The bunker will be incorporated into a place of healing that combines medicine, faith, and the power that's always been there. The viral video of your crisis, Marcus," she continued, "has prepared the way. People across the country have seen your raw honesty, your struggle. They'll be ready to hear about what comes next. Your story of doubt and redemption will open hearts to possibilities they never considered." As if to confirm her words, Marcus's phone buzzed with a news alert. His video had reached 10 million views, and national media outlets were picking up the story of the pastor who publicly renounced his faith after losing everything in Hurricane Gabriel. "But that's not the end of the story, is it?" Hope asked with a knowing smile. "It's just the beginning." She began to fade, her form becoming translucent. "When you're ready to begin building, I'll be there. Your mother will guide you through her journal, and your daughter will see what others can't." The old church had to fall so the true purpose of that ground could be revealed. As Hope disappeared, Laura squeezed Marcus's hand. "I understand now," she said. "Everything that happened, it was all leading to this moment." Marcus looked at his wife, then at Sarah, then at Grace. Each of them had witnessed something that defied explanation, yet felt undeniably true. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching the single gardenia that still bloomed impossibly on the bare branch outside. In his pocket, his mother's journal seemed to pulse with warmth, waiting to reveal more of its secrets. The path ahead was clear now. Not easy, but clear. They would build something new on that sacred ground, something that would combine the best of faith and healing, ancient wisdom and modern medicine. And somewhere, just beyond the veil of ordinary reality, Hope watched and waited, ready to guide them toward their extraordinary destiny. 2 weeks after Laura's awakening, Marcus stood on the grounds of what was once First Hope Community Church, watching as construction crews cleared the last of the hurricane debris. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the Florida landscape, but there was a sense of purpose in the air that made the heat more bearable. Laura sat in a wheelchair nearby, having been released from the hospital 3 days earlier. Her recovery had been remarkable. The doctors called it miraculous, though she still needed time to regain her full strength. Her belly had grown noticeably, their daughter making her presence known with frequent, strong movements. "She's active today," Laura said, placing her hand over the spot where the baby was kicking. "Hope says she's excited about what we're building." Marcus turned to his wife, still amazed by how naturally she spoke of their mysterious guide. Since waking from her coma, Laura's connection to Hope had grown stronger, more constant. While the young girl's appearances to others remained intermittent, Laura seemed able to sense her presence almost continuously. "The architectural plans arrived this morning," Marcus said, pulling out his tablet to show Laura the designs. They were a perfect fusion of his grandfather's original healing center concept and modern sustainable building practices. The bunker would be incorporated as a central feature, its unique properties enhanced rather than hidden. Sarah Matthews approached them, carrying several folders. Since the discovery of the bunker and Laura's awakening, she had taken on the role of project coordinator, helping to organize the massive undertaking they were about to begin. "The media requests are pouring in," she reported. "Everyone wants to know about the pastor who lost his faith and found something greater. And there's more. People are sharing stories about previous healings on this land. It's like Hope said, the world is ready for this." Marcus nodded, remembering his viral video. What had begun as a moment of crisis had evolved into something he never could have imagined. His public renunciation of faith, followed by the extraordinary events of the past weeks, had captured people's imagination and opened a dialogue about the nature of belief itself. "Show them the water analysis," Hope's voice came suddenly, though she remained invisible. Sarah quickly opened one of her folders. "Right, the geological survey team found something fascinating. The water under the bunker. It's different. The mineral composition is unique, and there are properties they can't explain. It's similar to reports from other known healing sites around the world." "The Native Americans knew," Laura said softly. "They called this place where spirit touches earth for a reason. The water carries the power." As if in response to her words, a breeze swept across the property, carrying with it the sweet scent of gardenias, Marcus's mother's favorite flower. He pulled out her journal, which had become their guide in many ways. Each day, new entries appeared, providing direction and insight just when they needed it most. Today's entry read, "The transformation of a place begins with the transformation of hearts. Let the world see how doubt can lead to deeper faith, how destruction can lead to rebirth. The healing center will be more than a building. It will be a bridge between heaven and earth." Thomas Rivera approached the group, leading a small delegation of people from different religious and medical backgrounds. They had formed an advisory board to help shape the vision of what the center would become. "The Interfaith Council is here for the blessing ceremony," Thomas announced. "And we've just received confirmation. The Medical Licensing Board has approved our preliminary plans for integrating traditional healthcare with alternative healing methods." Marcus smiled at his diplomatic phrasing. How does one officially classify healing powers that emanate from sacred ground and manifest through unexplainable means? Yet somehow they were finding a way to bridge the gap between the miraculous and the medical. The group gathered in a circle on the cleared ground. Representatives from various faiths, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Native American, and others, stood together with doctors, nurses, and members of the original congregation. As they joined hands, Hope appeared in the center, visible to all for the first time in such a large gathering. "The old barriers are falling," she announced, her voice carrying clearly to everyone present. "Faith and science, ancient and modern, physical and spiritual, all are threads in the same tapestry. This place will help the world remember that healing comes in many forms." A soft light began to emanate from the ground beneath their feet, rising like a gentle mist. Several people gasped, but no one broke the circle. Marcus felt a familiar warmth in his pocket, where his mother's journal rested. "Marcus," Hope said, turning to him, "it's time to tell them your story, the whole story, not just about losing your faith, but about finding something deeper. Show them how God works through our doubts and questions." Marcus looked around the circle at the assembled faces, then down at his mother's journal, and finally at Laura, who nodded encouragingly. He took a deep breath and began to speak. 2 months ago, I stood in this same spot and renounced everything I believed in. I thought God had abandoned us when Hurricane Gabriel destroyed our church and nearly took my family. I was wrong, not about the questions or the doubt, but about what they meant." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My mother knew this day would come. She knew that sometimes we have to lose everything we think we know about faith to discover what it truly is. This center we're building, it's not about returning to old certainties. It's about moving forward into something newer and deeper." As he spoke, the light from the ground grew stronger. Hope walked around the inside of the circle, touching each person gently. Where she touched them, people began to see visions, glimpses of what the center would become, the lives that would be transformed, the healing that would take place. "We're not just rebuilding a church," Marcus continued. "We're creating a place where faith and healing can work together, where ancient wisdom and modern medicine can complement each other. A place where people can bring their doubts and questions, their injuries and illnesses, and find hope in all its forms." Laura wheeled herself to his side, taking his hand. Tell them about the water, she encouraged. Marcus nodded. Beneath our feet runs water with properties science can't fully explain. The Native Americans knew of its power. During World War II, unexplainable healings occurred in the bunker that still exists below us. My grandfather designed a healing center to harness this power, but the time wasn't right. Now it is. Hope moved to stand beside them. Show them the journal, she instructed. Marcus held up his mother's journal, which now glowed with a soft light of its own. My mother left us a guide, a journal that continues to reveal its wisdom as we need it. Some will say these things are impossible. 2 months ago, I would have agreed, but I've learned that the line between possible and impossible is not where we think it is. The light from the ground reached its peak, enveloping the entire circle in a gentle golden glow. In that moment, every person present felt what Marcus had experienced during his transformation, the breaking down of old barriers, the expansion of what they thought possible, the deep knowing that they were part of something extraordinary. The world is hungry for healing, Hope declared, not just of bodies but of minds and spirits. They're ready for a place where faith can be questioned and strengthened, where healing can come through many paths, where heaven and earth meet. As the light began to fade, Marcus looked at the faces around him. He saw tears on many cheeks, looks of wonder and understanding. The transformation he had undergone personally was now spreading, touching others, preparing them for what was to come. We begin construction tomorrow, he announced. Each of you is here because you have a part to play in what this place will become. Some will call it miraculous, others will seek scientific explanations. Both perspectives are welcome here, because true healing embraces all paths to wholeness. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant colors. As the group dispersed, each person carrying a piece of the vision with them, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. His transformation from disillusioned pastor to something new was complete, yet he knew it was also just beginning. Hope remained after the others had gone, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Your mother is proud of you," she said softly. "You've become exactly who you needed to be." With those words, she faded away, leaving Marcus and Laura alone on the holy ground that would soon become a beacon of hope for thousands. The warm Florida night wrapped around them like a blessing, and somewhere in the distance, the sweet scent of gardenias drifted on the breeze. 3 months after the groundbreaking ceremony, the transformation of the old church site was progressing at an extraordinary pace. Where Hurricane Gabriel had left only destruction, a stunning new structure was rising from the earth. The center, as it had come to be known, seamlessly blended modern architecture with sacred geometry, its design incorporating the natural flow of energy from the underground springs that Hope had revealed. Marcus stood in what would become the main atrium, early morning sunlight streaming through specially designed crystal windows that created rainbow patterns across the floor. The bunker had been integrated into the building's design, its entrance now a beautiful spiral staircase that seemed to draw people naturally toward it. Laura, now 8 months pregnant, sat in a comfortable chair nearby, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "She's moving again," Laura said, smiling. "Hope says she's responding to the energy here. It's getting stronger as the building takes shape." The construction crew had experienced strange phenomena from the start. Tools would mysteriously move to exactly where they were needed, impossible coincidences would solve seemingly insurmountable problems, and workers reported feelings of peace and well-being that lingered long after their shifts ended. Sarah Matthews hurried in, her tablet displaying multiple news feeds. "The story's gone international," she announced. "The video of last week's spontaneous healing has over 20 million views." Marcus nodded, remembering the incident. A skeptical reporter had been interviewing him about the center when her chronic back pain suddenly vanished. The cameras had captured the moment, including the visible manifestation of Hope walking through the background, leaving a trail of soft light. "How are the medical trials progressing?" he asked. "Better than we could have hoped," Sarah replied. "Dr. Rodriguez's team has documented 15 cases of unexplained healing in the past week alone. The scientific community is baffled but intrigued. They're calling it the Palm Harbor phenomenon." The integration of traditional medicine with the center's unique healing properties had been one of their biggest challenges. They had assembled a team of open-minded medical professionals who worked alongside spiritual advisors from various faiths. The bunker, with its mysterious healing waters, had become a controlled research environment where the miraculous could be studied and documented. "Show them," Hope's voice echoed through the atrium. She appeared near the spiral staircase, more solid than usual. "Show them the journal entry for today." Marcus opened his mother's journal, which had continued to provide guidance throughout the construction. Today's entry read, "The healing of bodies is only the beginning. The true miracle is the healing of souls, the restoration of faith, not through blind belief but through witnessed wonders. Let them document, let them study, let them question. Truth grows stronger under examination." As if on cue, Dr. Elena Rodriguez entered with her research team. "Marcus, you need to see this," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "We've analyzed the water samples from the deepest part of the bunker. There's something extraordinary in its composition." She pulled up a holographic display showing molecular structures that seemed to defy conventional physics. These patterns, they're responding to human intention. When people pray or meditate near the water, the molecular structure changes. We've never seen anything like it. The Native Americans understood, Hope said, now visible to everyone present. They didn't need microscopes to know that this place was different. The water remembers prayers, holds healing intentions, amplifies faith. The research team had grown accustomed to Hope's appearances, treating her manifestations as another phenomenon to be studied and documented. Their findings were revolutionizing the understanding of the intersection between faith and science. Thomas Rivera arrived with a group of visitors, people who had traveled from across the country after seeing the viral videos and news reports. Among them was a young girl in a wheelchair, her eyes wide as she took in the stunning architecture. "Welcome to the center," Marcus greeted them warmly. "You're just in time for the morning gathering." The morning gathering had become a daily tradition, bringing together medical patients, spiritual seekers, scientists, and local community members. As people filed into the atrium, the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. The crystal windows cast their rainbow light across the assembled crowd, and a gentle warmth emanated from the floor, the healing waters making their presence known. Hope moved through the crowd, touching people gently as she passed. Each touch left a visible trail of light that lingered for several seconds. Some people gasped, others wept quietly. All felt something profound. "Today," Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the space, "we continue the work of integration. This place stands as testament to the fact that faith and science, ancient wisdom, and modern knowledge can work together toward healing." As he spoke, the young girl in the wheelchair suddenly straightened, her face illuminated with joy. Her mother burst into tears as she stood up, taking her first steps in 3 years. The research team immediately began documenting the event, while spiritual advisors moved forward to offer support and guidance. "This is how it should be," Hope said, appearing beside Marcus. "The miracle documented, the healing witnessed, the barriers between faith and reason dissolving in the face of undeniable truth." Laura watched from her chair, tears streaming down her face. "Our daughter is going to be part of this," she whispered. "She'll help people understand what's happening here." The morning gathering continued, with more healings occurring, some dramatic, others subtle. The research team moved efficiently through the crowd, recording data, taking measurements, conducting interviews. The spiritual advisors worked alongside them, offering prayer, meditation, and counseling. Marcus found himself standing next to Dr. Rodriguez as they watched the scene unfold. "How do you reconcile all this with your scientific training?" he asked her. She smiled thoughtfully. "Science is about observing and documenting reality, not limiting what reality can be. What's happening here is real. We can measure it, study it, even begin to understand the mechanisms. That doesn't make it any less miraculous." Hope appeared between them. "The greatest healing happens when we stop trying to separate the physical from the spiritual. Your mother knew this, Marcus. It's why she left so many clues in her journal." Marcus opened the journal again, finding a new entry that seemed to respond to his thoughts. "The center will be a place where skeptics find wonder and believers find evidence. Let them come with their doubts, their questions, their scientific instruments. Truth has nothing to fear from examination." As the morning progressed, more people arrived. News crews set up their equipment, researchers calibrated their instruments, and spiritual leaders from various faiths gathered to witness what was occurring. The center had become a focal point for a new understanding of healing, one that encompassed both the measurable and the mystical. The young girl who had been healed was now walking around the atrium, her mother following with tears of joy. Dr. Rodriguez's team was conducting preliminary examinations, documenting every aspect of the healing. Nearby, a Buddhist monk and a quantum physicist were engaged in deep discussion about the nature of reality and consciousness. "This is only the beginning," Hope said, her form glowing brighter than usual. As the center grows, as more people experience healing here, the understanding will spread. The old divisions between faith and science, between miracle and medicine, are falling away. Laura called out suddenly, her hands pressing against her belly. "She's coming soon," she said, looking at Hope. "Our daughter, she's almost ready to join us." Hope nodded, smiling. "She'll be born here, in this place of healing. She'll see what I see, help others understand what this place truly is. The next phase is about to begin." As the sun reached its zenith, the crystal windows created a spectacular display of light throughout the atrium. The healing waters beneath their feet seemed to pulse with energy, and every person present felt the unmistakable sense that they were part of something revolutionary, a new chapter in the understanding of faith, healing, and the mysteries that connect them. Marcus looked around at the gathering of scientists, spiritual leaders, seekers, and healers. His transformation from a pastor who had lost everything to the guardian of this sacred place was complete. Yet he knew that this was just the beginning of an even greater transformation, one that would touch countless lives and bridge the ancient divide between the miraculous and the measurable. The center of healing was becoming exactly what his mother had foreseen, what hope had guided them to create, and what the world desperately needed. A place where heaven and earth met, where faith and science danced together, and where healing flowed as freely as the mysterious waters beneath their feet. The evening sun cast long shadows through the crystal windows of the center, painting the atrium in hues of gold and amber. Laura's labor had begun in the early hours of the morning, and now, as twilight approached, the moment they had all been waiting for drew near. Marcus held his wife's hand as she breathed through another contraction, the energy of the place seeming to pulse in rhythm with her body. They had prepared a special room for the birth, directly above the heart of the bunker where the healing waters ran strongest. Dr. Rodriguez supervised the medical aspects, while spiritual advisors from various traditions maintained a peaceful vigil nearby. The entire center hummed with anticipation. "It's time," Hope appeared, more luminous than ever before. "Your daughter is ready to enter this world." Laura nodded, her face serene despite the intensity of her labor. The past few days she had spoken of dreams and visions, of conversations with Hope about what was to come. Now, as the moment approached, there was a palpable sense that something extraordinary was about to occur. "Remember," Hope said, placing her hand on Laura's belly, "your daughter will see what I see. She'll help others understand the thin places where heaven touches earth. But first, there's something you all need to know." The room filled with a soft golden light emanating from Hope herself. Her form seemed more solid, yet somehow more ethereal, as if she existed in multiple dimensions at once. Marcus felt his mother's journal grow warm in his pocket. "My time here is drawing to a close," Hope announced, her voice carrying a hint of both joy and sadness. "I was sent to guide you through the transformation, to help reveal the true purpose of this sacred ground. Now that purpose has been fulfilled, and a new guardian is about to arrive." Marcus felt his heart constrict. "You're leaving? But there's still so much to learn, so much we don't understand." Hope smiled gently. "Your daughter will understand. She'll see the patterns I've seen, know the truths I've known. My story, the little girl who died saving others in the church fire, was just one chapter in this place's long history. Each generation has its guardian, its witness to the sacred. Now it's time for the next chapter to begin." Laura's contractions intensified, and the energy in the room seemed to spiral upward. The crystal windows began to vibrate with a harmonic frequency that filled the air with music, a sound like distant choirs and rushing waters combined. "Open the journal," Hope instructed Marcus. "Read what your mother has written for this moment." With trembling hands, Marcus opened to the newest entry. "My dearest Marcus and Laura, the circle completes itself today. Hope came to me in my darkest hour, showing me glimpses of this future. I saw your daughter before I died, saw what she would become, what she would help create. My sacrifice was a small price to pay for the miracle that is about to unfold. Hope has been the bridge between my time and yours. Now your daughter will be the bridge between heaven and earth, helping others understand the healing that happens in thin places. All my love, Mom." As Marcus read the words aloud, the light in the room grew brighter. Hope's form began to shift, becoming more translucent, more light than substance. "It's happening," she said, her voice filled with joy. "She's coming." Dr. Rodriguez moved efficiently, preparing for the birth, while the spiritual advisors began to chant softly, prayers and blessings from different traditions blending into a single harmonious sound. The healing waters beneath the floor seemed to surge upward, their energy palpable to everyone present. "One last thing," Hope said, her form flickering like a candle flame. "Each person who comes here seeking healing will find what they truly need, though it may not always be what they think they want. Your daughter will help them understand the difference. She will see their hearts just as I have seen yours," Laura cried out as the final stage of labor began. The room's energy intensified, the light growing almost blindingly bright. Hope moved to stand at the head of the bed, her form now barely visible except as pure light. "Push," Dr. Rodriguez encouraged. "The baby's coming." With a final effort, Laura brought their daughter into the world. The infant's first cry merged with the harmonic tones filling the room, creating a sound that seemed to pierce the veil between worlds. As Dr. Rodriguez placed the baby on Laura's chest, Hope's light seemed to flow into the newborn child. "Her name is Grace," Hope said, her voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere. "She carries within her the wisdom of ages, the healing power of this sacred place, and the ability to see beyond the visible world. Love her, guide her, and trust what she shows you." The baby opened her eyes, and everyone present gasped. Her gaze held the same ancient wisdom they had seen in Hope's eyes, the same understanding of things beyond ordinary perception. "My time here is complete," Hope said, her form now barely discernible. "But I am not truly leaving. My story, like your mother's, becomes part of the greater story of this place. Grace will understand. She already does." As if in confirmation, the newborn turned her head toward where Hope's voice originated, a smile of recognition crossing her tiny face. The crystal windows sang with light, and the healing waters beneath the floor surged with renewed energy. "Remember," Hope's voice came one last time, fading like distant music, "God's silence doesn't mean his absence. Sometimes it just means he's working deeper than we can see. Grace will help you understand the silence, read the patterns, and continue the work we've begun." With those words, Hope's visible presence dissolved into pure light, which seemed to settle over baby Grace like a blessing. The room gradually returned to normal illumination, but something had fundamentally changed. The center itself felt different, as if it had shifted into a new phase of its existence. Marcus and Laura looked down at their daughter, who gazed back at them with eyes that seemed to hold universes. Dr. Rodriguez quietly documented the extraordinary phenomena they had witnessed, while the spiritual advisors offered prayers of gratitude and blessing. "She's beautiful," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And look, she has your mother's eyes, Marcus." Indeed, Grace had the same deep, knowing gaze that Marcus remembered from his mother's photographs. As he watched, his daughter turned her head to track something invisible to adult eyes, smiling at mysteries only she could perceive. The journal in Marcus's pocket had one final entry from Hope. "The center will continue to grow, to heal, to bridge the gaps between faith and science, between the seen and unseen. Grace will show you new wonders, new ways of understanding the sacred. My work here is complete, but the greater work is just beginning. Watch for the signs. They're everywhere for those who have eyes to see. And remember, I am not truly gone. I am part of the story now, part of the healing that happens in this thin place where heaven touches earth." As night fell over the center, the first stars appearing through the crystal windows, Marcus and Laura held their daughter close. The healing waters continued their eternal flow beneath them, and the sacred ground that had transformed their lives hummed with endless possibility. Grace, barely an hour old, reached out toward something only she could see, gurgling with delight. In that moment, Marcus understood that while one chapter had ended with Hope's farewell, another was just beginning. Their daughter would show them new mysteries, new miracles, and new ways of understanding the thin places where the divine touches the everyday world. The center of healing entered a new phase of its existence, with a new guardian to watch over its sacred purpose. Hope's farewell wasn't an ending, but a transformation, a passing of the torch to the next generation of witnesses to the miraculous. 1 year had passed since Hope's farewell and Grace's birth. The center of healing had grown into something far beyond what Marcus and Laura had initially imagined. The modern structure, with its crystal windows and sacred geometry, had become a beacon of hope for people from around the world. Today they were preparing for a special ceremony to commemorate both the anniversary and the completion of the center's final phase of construction. Grace, now a toddler with curious eyes and her grandmother's knowing smile, sat in Laura's lap as they watched the sunrise through the crystal windows. The baby had grown into an extraordinary child, one who could see what others couldn't, and whose presence seemed to amplify the healing energy of the place. "Look," Grace said, pointing to an empty space near the spiral staircase that led to the bunker. Though only she could see it, her parents knew she was watching hope, or perhaps something even more profound. The child had an ability to perceive multiple layers of reality, often engaging with invisible presences that left tangible effects in their wake. Marcus approached his family, holding his mother's journal. The book had continued to provide guidance through Grace's first year, though its entries now seemed to come through the child herself. Grace would often take the journal, flip to a blank page, and place her tiny hand upon it. Moments later, new wisdom would appear in his mother's familiar handwriting. "The dignitaries are arriving," Sarah Matthews announced, tablet in hand. "We have representatives from 12 different countries, 7 major religious traditions, and some of the world's leading medical researchers." The center had become a focal point for a new understanding of healing that bridged the gap between science and faith. Dr. Rodriguez's research team had documented thousands of cases of inexplicable recoveries, while simultaneously developing new theories about the interaction between consciousness, intention, and physical healing. "The waters are especially active today," Laura observed, feeling the familiar warmth emanating from beneath the floor. The healing springs that ran through the bunker had become even more powerful since Grace's birth, their properties now measurable by scientific instruments that hadn't existed a year ago. Grace suddenly giggled, reaching out towards something invisible. "Hope says it's time," she announced with the clear pronunciation that had surprised everyone since her first words. "The big light is coming." Marcus nodded, understanding. Throughout the year, Grace had served as a translator of sorts, helping adults understand the deeper mysteries of the place. She could see the patterns of energy, the movements of spirit, and the presence of those who had come before, including Hope and his mother. The atrium began to fill with guests. The international media had gathered to document the anniversary, their cameras capturing the spectacular play of light through the crystal windows. Scientists mingled with spiritual leaders, their former divisions dissolved by the undeniable evidence they had witnessed here. Thomas Rivera, now the center's head of community relations, began guiding people to their places. The circular arrangement of seats reflected the sacred geometry that defined the building's design, creating patterns that Grace had helped them understand were important for the flow of healing energy. "It's remarkable," Dr. Rodriguez said, approaching Marcus with her latest research findings. "The healing frequencies we've measured in the water have harmonized perfectly with Grace's brainwave patterns. It's as if she's in constant communication with the very essence of this place." Marcus smiled, watching his daughter wave at another invisible presence. "She is," he replied simply. "She sees what Hope showed us was possible, what my mother knew would come to pass." Laura stood, carrying Grace to the center of the gathering. The child reached out, touching the air in specific patterns that had become familiar to those who worked at the center. Where her fingers traced, subtle lines of light appeared, visible to everyone present. "The veils are thin today," Grace announced, her voice carrying clearly through the space. "Hope says we can all see now." As if responding to her words, the crystal windows began to vibrate with that now familiar harmonic tone. The healing waters beneath the floor pulsed with enhanced energy, and the air itself seemed to thicken with possibility. Marcus opened the journal to its newest entry, which had appeared under Grace's touch that morning. The center stands as a bridge between worlds, between ways of knowing and healing. Today, the boundaries thin even further. What was hidden will be revealed. What was separate will be united. The work we began continues through new eyes, new understanding, and new hope. Grace raised her small hands, and suddenly everyone present could see what she saw daily. The air filled with soft light, taking forms that moved with purpose through the gathering. Hope was there, more visible than she had been since Grace's birth, along with other presences that radiated peace and healing. "My God," one of the scientists whispered, his instruments going wild with readings. "It's all real, everything the child sees." "Science and faith," Grace said, speaking with a wisdom far beyond her years. "Medicine and miracle, they're the same thing, seen from different angles. Hope showed us the way. Grandmother prepared the path. Now we all can see." The gathering watched in awe as the visible manifestations of spirit moved among them. Healings began to occur spontaneously, not just physical healings, but deeper restorations of soul and spirit. The media cameras captured everything, broadcasting live to a world ready to embrace a new understanding of reality. Marcus and Laura stood with their daughter between them, watching as the center fulfilled its ultimate purpose. The viral video of Marcus renouncing his faith now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by countless documented miracles and transformed lives. The center isn't just a place, Grace explained, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the space. It's a beginning. What happens here will spread. The healing will flow out like the waters beneath us, touching more and more people, helping them remember what they've forgotten. As if to demonstrate, the child began to glow with a soft light that gradually extended to encompass everyone present. In that moment, each person could see as she saw, understand as she understood. The barriers between physical and spiritual, between science and faith, between doubt and belief, dissolved in the face of direct experience. This is what Hope wanted us to understand, Marcus addressed the gathering. This is what my mother prepared us for. The center isn't about choosing between faith and reason, between miracle and medicine. It's about remembering that they were never separate to begin with. The ceremony continued as Grace led them through a new kind of healing ritual, one that combined the precision of science with the power of faith, the wisdom of ancient traditions with the insights of modern research. Dr. Rodriguez's team documented everything, their instruments recording changes that would revolutionize the understanding of healing. As the day drew to a close, Grace turned to her parents with a smile that held echoes of both hope and her grandmother. "It's really beginning now," she said. "The big work. Hope says we're ready." The final entry appeared in the journal, this time in multiple handwritings, Marcus's mother's, Hope's, and a child's careful scrawl. The center stands complete, but its work is just beginning. Through the eyes of a child, the world will remember what it means to be whole. The healing that begins here will ripple outward, touching lives in ways we can only imagine. The story continues, as it always has, through those who have eyes to see and hearts open to wonder. The setting sun painted the crystal windows in brilliant colors, and the healing waters sang beneath their feet. Marcus and Laura held their remarkable daughter close, knowing they were part of something far greater than themselves. The center of healing had become exactly what Hope had promised, a place where heaven and earth met, where faith and science danced together, and where the next chapter of humanity's understanding of healing was being written. Grace waved to her invisible friends, her laugh echoing through the sacred space. The new beginning had arrived, and with it the promise of healing for a world in desperate need of both miracle and meaning. Have you ever experienced a moment where faith and doubt collided in your life? Marcus's journey from crisis to transformation reminds us that sometimes our deepest questions lead to the most profound discoveries. Share your thoughts. What resonated most with you in this story of healing, hope, and the mysterious ways faith works in our lives? Has your faith ever been tested, only to emerge stronger in unexpected ways? Drop a comment below. Every journey of faith is unique, and your story matters.